Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. When the darkness calls, you never miss it. Let's now enter the shadowy world of the trucking sector in America, where every mile marker could be your last and the open road turns into a corridor of fear. Long-haul truck driver Daniel "Big Dan" Martinez was traveling across the barren New Mexico desert between Albuquerque and Amarillo in the early hours of October 12, 1998, as part of his daily run along Interstate 40. For almost 15 years, the 38-year-old professional driver had been transporting cargo throughout the Southwest, renowned in the trucking industry for his flawless safety record and penchant for the difficult overnight routes that most drivers shun. He was delivering a full cargo of electronics from Los Angeles to Dallas that evening. It was a standard delivery that ought to have gone through familiar ground without any problems. The weather was perfect for driving at night. The temperature was about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The skies were clear, and there was no wind. Throughout his career, Martinez had traveled this exact route more than 200 times, so he was familiar with every truck stop, way station, and the distance between the two cities is 1 mile. To 47 a.m. he had just passed through Chukumari and was continuing to cruise at his usual speed of 65 miles per hour. He was due to make his next fuel break in Amarillo at around 5:30 a.m. According to his dispatch logs, he arrived at 2:30 a.m. on time, stating that the roads are clear and free of any mechanical problems with his Peterbilt 379 from 1996. Martinez was unaware that truckers on this particular section of Interstate 40 had been reporting increasingly unsettling incidents to state troopers for the previous 3 months. 3:15 a.m. Martinez saw a figure standing on the highway shoulder, thumb out in the classic hitchhiker's gesture, some 28 miles east of Chukumari. Via his CB radio, he then stated that the person seemed to be a middle-aged male or a professional, position utterly motionless, even though it was 40 outside and the closest settlement was more than 20 meters away. There was something immediately wrong with it. In 15 years of driving, you develop instincts about these things, Martinez would later tell investigators. Normal people don't hitchhike in the middle of nowhere. 3 a.m. Martinez made the decision to continue past the hitchhiker without stopping. This decision probably saved his life. However, he was surprised to see the identical individual standing beside the highway ahead of him in the exact same posture with his thumb out when he checked his mirrors about a mile down the road. "I knew it was impossible," Martinez said in his official report. "I had just passed this guy. Unless he had some sort of vehicle, he could not have gotten ahead of me. And 4 miles, I saw no trucks or cars on that route." After passing the number a second time, Martinez quickly reached for his CB radio and tried to call other nearby drivers, but all he got was static response. At 3:32 a.m., when Martinez saw the hitchhiker for the third time, he was now standing directly in the middle of the interstate, about 2 miles ahead. This time, the figure wasn't making any gestures for a ride, but instead was standing motionless in the center lane, forcing Martinez to swerve into the left lane in order to avoid colliding with him. "When I was close enough to see him clearly," Martinez later testified, "I realized this wasn't right. The man's complexion had a strange, unnaturally pale quality, and his clothes appeared vintage, as if they were from the 1970s. His eyes, however, were the worst. There were no whites at all. They were entirely black." Martinez's truck's electrical equipment started to malfunction badly as he passed the figure for the third time. His headlights flickered quickly. His CB radio made a high-pitched whining noise, and his dashboard instruments started whirling erratically before going entirely dark. It was as if something was interfering with all the electrical systems, but the mechanical parts of the truck were operating flawlessly. At 3:45 a.m., Martinez finally noticed the lights of an approaching truck in his rearview mirror and was able to flag down the vehicle. The engine continued to run normally, but he was now driving practically blind on a dark desert highway with no way to communicate with the outside world. "I've been driving trucks for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like that. We both saw him clear as day," Chen testified, standing right in the middle of the flyover, looking down at us. "But when we got to that flyover, nobody was there." The approaching vehicle was driven by Robert Chen, a 42-year-old owner-operator who had been on the same route about 15 minutes behind Martinez. Chen later reported that when he stopped to help Martinez, both men noticed a mysterious figure now standing on a flyover about half a mile ahead of them. No cars, no footprints, nothing, when Martinez and Chen arrived at the truck stop in Tucari and called the New Mexico State Police at 4:12 a.m. The first responding officer, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, arrived at the scene at 5:30 a.m. to conduct interviews and inspect the section of highway where the incidents occurred. At first, we treated this as a potential person in distress on the highway. The investigation took a troubling turn when Rodriguez learnt that Martinez and Chen were the fourth and fifth truckers to report nearly identical encounters on that exact stretch of I-40 within the last 6 weeks. According to Highway Patrol records, driver Thomas Riss had reported seeing a hitchhiker who appeared and disappeared multiple times along the same route on August 28th. Rodriguez later explained, "We conducted a thorough search of the area, using canine units and helicopter support, but found no evidence that anyone had been walking along that section of road." Detective Ray Hoffman of the New Mexico State Police was assigned to lead a thorough investigation into what was being called the I-40 Phantom case, because she encountered a pale figure wearing antiquated clothing who caused her truck's electrical systems to malfunction. Most notably, on September 23rd, driver William Bill Morrison had reported the same sequence of events, 3 sightings of the same individual, electrical malfunctions, and the figure's final appearance on the flyover. Hoffman had the investigation team widen their search to include historical records and found a chilling connection to the area's past. On November 3, 1976, a hitchhiker named Raymond Morris had been struck and killed by a scimitar on the exact stretch of highway where the modern sightings were occurring. Hoffman noted in his case files that truckers are generally very reliable witnesses, not people who are prone to flights of fancy. When multiple experienced drivers report the same impossible sequence of events, we have to take it seriously. Morris, 34, was a construction worker who had been trying to hitchhike from Tucumari to Amarillo after his car broke down. According to Gerald Matthews, the driver of the truck that hit him, Morris had appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the road and he couldn't stop in time to avoid the collision. It was later determined that Morris's death had been especially traumatic for the trucking community, with Matthews, who had been driving for 20 years without an accident, being so devastated by the incident that he immediately retired from trucking and never again drove commercially. The case gained national attention when Hoffman found that Morris had been wearing the exact same type of clothing described by the modern witnesses: a brown work shirt, blue jeans, and construction boots that were typical of 1970s work attire, and that his personal belongings and clothing were dispersed across nearly a quarter of a mile of highway, as reported in the 1976 police report. What was most unsettling was that multiple witnesses claimed to have seen Morris's body vanish from the accident scene, only to reappear in various locations along the highway during the investigation. When shown the photo, Martinez said, There was no question that was definitely the man I saw on the highway, down to the same facial features and hairstyle. In December 1998, the New Mexico State Police formally classified the case as unexplained phenomena and instituted new safety procedures for the stretch of Interstate 40 where the sightings occurred. State troopers started patrolling the area regularly during the night when the sightings were most frequently reported, and additional emergency call boxes were placed every 5 meters. In response to the I-40 Phantom case, the trucking industry created new training protocols for drivers who frequently traveled southwestern routes. The New Mexico Department of Transportation installed more lighting and reflective markers to improve driver visibility. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association released safety guidelines specifically addressing encounters with unexplained phenomena on isolated highways, stressing the importance of keeping in touch with other drivers, and RIA Memorial Service is held every November, attended by dozens of truck drivers who pause in their journeys to pay respects to Raymond Morris and reflect on the dangers faced by those who make their living on the road. For truck drivers who still travel the lonely stretches of America's interstate system, the I-40 Phantom case serves as a haunting reminder that not all dangers on the highway can be avoided through skill and experience alone. The case is officially unexplained, and sightings are still occasionally reported by drivers traveling. This marker, which was funded by donations from trucking companies and individual drivers, bears the inscription in memory of all travelers who have found their final rest on America's highways. On the night of June 14, 2003, veteran long-haul trucker Sarah Michelle Thompson was nearing the end of a long 11-hour drive from Phoenix to Denver when she pulled into the Sunset Mesa Truck Plaza, a 24-hour facility located 47 miles west of Flagstaff on Interstate 40. The 29-year-old owner-operator had been driving professionally for 8 years and was well known in the southwestern trucking community for her meticulous attention to safety protocols and her ability to handle the most difficult, albeit it was a routine delivery of auto parts to a General Motors facility in Colorado, one that should have ended safely at the customer's dock the next morning. The Sunset Mesa Truck Plaza was a typical mid-sized facility with 40 parking spaces, fuel islands, a convenience store, showers, and a small diner that was open 24 hours a day to accommodate the constant flow of commercial traffic on the transcontinental route, and Thompson had stopped there dozens of times over the years, so he knew the layout, the personnel, and the usual customers that frequented the place at night. At 11:23 p.m., when she backed her 2001 Freightliner Columbia into Space 27, made the required logbook entries, and secured her trailer, Thompson didn't realize that a man had been watching her arrive from the shadows near the back of the parking lot as she made her way towards the main building. Security footage later showed that the man had been at the truck stop for more than 4 hours, hopping between different cars and seemingly studying the drivers who came and went throughout the evening. The man was Lau in the convenience store. Thompson made her usual purchases: a cup of coffee, a sandwich, and some roadside snacks, while chatting casually with Jenny Martinez, the night clerk, who had been working there for 3 years. Sarah was one of our regulars, Martinez later testified, and she was always friendly, always professional, and she knew how to take care of herself on the road. Marcus Dale Whitman had been using the truck stop as a hunting ground for victims, carefully choosing targets based on their vulnerability and the likelihood that their disappearance would go unnoticed for extended periods of time. I thought maybe the load had moved and put pressure on the latch mechanism, but as I got closer, I could see that someone had tampered with her trailer's rear doors, leaving them slightly ajar, even though I had carefully secured them before entering the store. This was captured on security cameras as Thompson finished her transaction at 11:47 p.m. and left the store to head back to her truck, not realizing Whitman was now standing close to her vehicle when Thompson approached her goods linn. When she looked into it further, She found that the security seal had been broken and that there were footprints in the dirt near the back of the trailer that were definitely not mine. She also found that a number of boxes had been moved and that someone had obviously been inside her trailer, even though nothing seemed to be missing. Thompson called her dispatcher on her cell phone to report the possible cargo theft, but as she was talking, she noticed that someone was coming up behind her. He simply stood there looking at me blankly, as if he was contemplating his next move. It was obvious to me right away that this was not a robbery. This was something far worse. In an attempt to buy time until help could arrive, Thompson used her years of experience handling dangerous situations on the road to keep her dispatcher on the line while conversing with Whitman. "I've got a problem here," she said to her dispatcher, loud enough to make it obvious that the situation was an emergency. "There's a man with a knife who's been going through my caravan." The situation quickly escalated when Thompson tried to flee towards the main building where other people were present, and Whitman lunged at her with the knife. But Thompson had foreseen the attack and managed to dodge the blade while grabbing a tire iron from her truck's tall compartment. "I've been driving trucks for 8 years, and you learnt to defend yourself out here," she later explained. "I wasn't going to be a victim without a fight." Whitman became agitated when he realized that lasted for several minutes, during which time Whitman kept trying to corner Thompson, while she maintained distance and defensive positioning by using her understanding of the layout of the truck stop. Thompson's dispatcher called the Coconino County Sheriff's Office at 12:03 a.m. to report an assault at the Sunset Mesa Truck Plaza, and Deputy Marcus Chen was the first to arrive at the scene at 12:11 a.m., only to discover Thompson and Whitman still fighting to the death near the back of the T when he arrived. Whitman was chasing Thompson around her truck while threatening her with the knife, Chen later reported, and Thompson was effectively using her vehicle as a barrier while calling for help. When law enforcement arrived, Whitman became frightened and tried to escape on foot into the desert terrain surrounding the truck stop, but Deputy Chen was joined by other units within minutes, and a coordinated search of the area led to Whitman's capture. Roughly 2 miles from the truck plaza, the investigation into Whitman's actions at the truck stop and his possible connection to other crimes against commercial drivers was led by Detective Lisa Rodriguez of the Coconino County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Unit, who had 8 years of experience investigating violent crimes and specialized training in cases involving serial predators who targeted specific victim demographics. When we started looking into Whitman's background and the evidence he was carrying, we realized this wasn't an isolated incident, Rodriguez explained, adding that he was carrying not only the hunting knife used in the attack on Thompson, but also various items that seemed to belong to other truck drivers, such as wallets, identification cards, and personal jewelry. The investigation found that Whitman had been running what investigators called a mobile hunting ground for months, if not years, moving between truck stops across Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado to find and attack vulnerable drivers, spending hours researching potential victims, learning their routines, and figuring out when they would be most vulnerable and alone. The items in his possession were connected to at least 7 other truck drivers who had been reported missing over the past 18 months, including to whose bodies had been found in remote desert locations. DNA evidence linked Whitman definitively to the murders of 4 truck drivers whose cases had previously been classified as unsolved, and forensic examination of his vehicle and personal belongings turned up evidence linking him to several crime scenes throughout the Southwest. But the most unsettling finding was what investigators called a trophy collection: photographs, identification documents, and personal items taken from his victims, meticulously arranged and catalogued in a way that suggested he had been planning and carrying out these attacks for a long time. Detective Rodriguez noted that Whitman had essentially turned his knowledge of the trucking industry into a system for finding and attacking victims. When investigators learnt that he had worked as a mechanic at various truck stops in service facilities throughout the region, giving him intimate knowledge of trucker schedules, routes, and security procedures. He had practically turned his knowledge of the trucking industry into a system for finding and attacking victims. In March 2004, Marcus Dale Whitman entered a guilty plea to 4 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of assault and attempted murder in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The Whitman case led to major changes in security procedures at truck stops across the American Southwest, with the American Trucking Associations working with facility owners to install more surveillance cameras aimed at trailer loading areas, where attacks were most likely to occur, improve parking area, alighting, and increase the frequency of security patrols. Whitman was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and is currently incarcerated at the Arizona State Prison. The International Association of Truck Stop Operators created new training programs for employees to help them recognize suspicious behavior and respond appropriately to potential threats against commercial drivers, emphasizing the importance of keeping in touch with law enforcement and creating environments where drivers felt safe, reporting concerns about their personal security. Many truck stops also started requiring drivers to check in with facility staff when arriving and departing, honoring Sarah Michelle Thompson's bravery in surviving the assault and assisting in the prosecution of a serial killer. The plaque says, each June, the facility hosts an annual safety symposium that brings together truck drivers, law enforcement, and security professionals to discuss evolving threats and prevention strategies for truck drivers who continue to navigate the isolated highways and remote facilities, in remembrance of those who lost their lives on America's highways, and in recognition of the strength and determination of those who refuse to become victims. It is that are vital to the goods transportation network in America. Because of the inherent weaknesses of the trucking industry, predators intentionally target this group, as the Marcus Whitman case offers as a clear reminder. The example showed that being alert and prepared are crucial for road survival, and that even seasoned drivers who follow the right safety measures can end up in potentially fatal scenarios. A shipment of frozen seafood was being transported from Seattle to Chicago by seasoned long-haul truck driver Michael James Mick Harrison in the early hours of March 8, 2005, as he traveled his usual route along Interstate 84 through the isolated mountainous area of eastern Oregon. One of the most dependable owner-operators in the Pacific Northwest, the 44-year-old veteran driver has been on the road for more than 22 years. Harrison was well known for his on-time deliveries and careful upkeep of his 1999 Kenworth W900L. He had hundreds of experiences transporting temperature-sensitive freight over near this difficult terrain, and he was a preferred contractor for high-value shipments that needed both competence and complete dependability because of his impeccable safety record and understanding of mountain driving skills. With heavy snow falling persistently and visibility dropping to less than 200 feet in several places throughout the mountain routes, the weather that morning was especially dangerous. At 4:30 a.m., Harrison had checked in with his dispatcher, M, from the way station close to land, stating that although the state of the roads was getting worse, they were still manageable with the right care and slower speed. According to his GPS monitoring device, he was traveling through the Blue Mountains at a steady 45 miles per hour, which was well within the safe range for the weather. He was expected to reach his next required rest stop in Pendleton around 7:15 a.m. It was 5:47 a.m. when he made his last radio call. When he replied to the weather report of another driver report, indicating that he was moving cautiously through the mountain pass and verifying his position at mile marker to 148. Harrison had no idea that he would soon be at the center of one of the most puzzling disappearances in the history of commercial transportation. 6:15 a.m. about 15 miles east of the town of Meacham, Another truck driver named Robert Yamamoto told Oregon State Police to report sighting Harrison's recognizable red and chrome Kenworth pulled over on the highway shoulder, with its hazard lights flashing. Yamamoto later testified that the truck was simply sitting there in the snow. Although the trailer appeared undamaged, there was something off about the entire scene. He didn't respond when I tried to raise him on the CB, as is customary for skilled drivers who watch out for one another on hazardous mountain roads. Yamamoto decided to pull over and see how Harrison was doing. He found the driver's door of the Kenworth standing wide open as he got closer. Harrison's personal items, such as his cell phone, wallet, and logbook, were strewn all over the cab as though he had left in a hurry, and the engine was still running. It appeared as though he had simply disappeared. Yamamoto informed the detectives. His CB radio was on, the heater was going, and his coffee was still warm, but Mick was nowhere to be seen. I yelled for him and looked all around the truck, but I couldn't find any footprints in the snow that led off of it. At 6:22 a.m., Yamamoto called the Oregon State Police dispatch with an emergency, and the first person on the scene, Trooper Jennifer Walsh, arrived at 6:51 a.m. Despite the difficult, Walsh's preliminary evaluation of the driving conditions supported Yamamoto's findings. It looked like Harrison's truck was in excellent mechanical shape. There were no indications of an accident, mechanical malfunction, or struggle that could account for his absence, and his cargo of frozen seafood remained safe and undisturbed. Walsh further clarified, "I've responded to hundreds of truck-related incidents in my 12 years of highway patrol, but I've never seen anything like this. The driver seemed to have just vanished." Additional state police units, search and rescue teams, and volunteers from the local trucking community quickly started exploring the surrounding wilderness in an effort to find Harrison. Despite the ongoing snowstorm, the area surrounding mile marker 248 was made up of rocky outcroppings, deep ravines, and dense forest, making it very risky to go across, especially in bad weather and at night. Despite scanning a 5mm radius surrounding Harrison's truck with helicopters, canine units, and thermal imaging equipment, search teams were unable to locate the missing driver or any indication that he had left the immediate vicinity. When Oregon State Police Detective Raymond Forster learnt that Harrison was not the only trucker to inexplicably disappear along this specific section of Interstate 84, the inquiry gained even more urgency. 4 other commercial drivers had vanished under identical circumstances within a 20-meter radius of Harrison's position the preceding 8 years. According to department statistics, in all instances, the driver's truck was discovered unharmed but abandoned, with personal items still inside and no obvious indication of the driver's whereabouts or reason for leaving the car. In addition to 15 years of expertise looking into missing person cases, Detective Forster had specific training in conducting search and rescue missions in hilly areas. You have to think that something systematic is going on when you observe this pattern of disappearances in the same geographic area. In his case files, Forster stated, "These breakdowns weren't random. The investigation team extended their search to include interviews with truckers who frequently traveled the I-84 corridor in an attempt to find common factors or unusual circumstances that might explain the disappearances. They found a disturbing pattern of reports about strange lights, unexplained electronic malfunctions, and encounters with unidentified individuals along the same stretch of highway where the vanishings had occurred. These drivers were all experienced, professional drivers who knew how to handle mountain driving conditions, and they were all disappearing in ways that defied logical explanation, moving through the forest at night, frequently with their CB radios and GPS systems completely broken." Veteran driver Linda Chen was one of the most important witnesses, recounting an incident that happened just 3 weeks prior to Harrison's disappearance. Chen said that when she stopped to help what appeared to be a stranded motorist, She found that the person was wearing old clothes and speaking a dialect that didn't seem to be related to the area. Jean testified, "When I got close enough to my truck's electrical system went haywire when I tried to back away. Headlights flickered, radio emitting static, dashboard instruments spinning wildly." The case garnered national attention when investigators found a link between the I-84 disappearances and local Native American tribal legends about the Blue Mountain region. According to Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, the area where the vanishings occurred had been considered sacred and dangerous for centuries, with traditional stories warning against traveling through certain sections of the mountains during specific weather conditions or seasons. The legends spoke of spirits that could call travelers away from their path and cause them to become lost between the physical and spiritual worlds, said tribal elder James Yellowbird. Investigators began to speculate that the disappearances might be related to disturbances of sacred sites during the construction of Interstate 84, which was built directly over an ancient tribal migration route that had been used for thousands of years. Archaeological surveys carried out in the 1970s during the highway's construction had found evidence of significant Native American settlements and burial sites in the immediate area, but these findings had been largely overlooked during the rush to complete the interstate system. Although hundreds of volunteers and several agencies searched for Michael Harrison for 6 months without finding him, the Oregon State Police officially classified the case as a missing person investigation with suspicious circumstances on September 15, 2005, and Harrison was declared legally dead 7 years later at his family's request. His truck and cargo were eventually turned over to his insurance company, but the mystery surrounding his disappearance remained unsolved. The Oregon Department frequency of state police patrols at night. The department also collaborated with tribal leaders to train law enforcement personnel in cultural sensitivity and to create procedures for investigating incidents that may have links to sacred sites or traditional beliefs. The American Trucking Associations issued new guidelines for drivers traversing remote mountain areas, stressing the need to stay in constant contact with dispatchers, to travel in convoys when possible in bad weather, and to report any unusual encounters or electronic malfunctions right away. And many trucking companies started installing more tracking and communication equipment to ensure that drivers could be located quickly in an emergency. In recognition of Michael Harrison and the other drivers who had disappeared along the mountain corridor, a memorial marker was placed at the Immigrant Springs rest area on Interstate 84. The marker, which was dedicated in cooperation with tribal authorities, features both Native American and English inscriptions that acknowledge the sacredness of the land and the significance of honoring the spiritual traditions of the area's original inhabitants. Each March, truckers, tribal members, and family members of the missing drivers come together for an annual memorial gathering that honors their memory and fosters understanding between the various communities that share the highway. The I-84 vanishings continue to be a haunting reminder to truck drivers who continue to traverse the difficult mountain passes of the American West that not all highway dangers can be anticipated or avoided through conventional safety measures. The case is still officially unsolved, and those who recognize that some road mysteries may never be fully explained continue to view the stretch of interstate where Harrison and the others disappeared with caution and respect. On the evening of August 23, 2001, long-haul trucker Kevin Dale Morrison was starting the last leg of a cross-country delivery from Portland, Oregon to Jacksonville, Florida, when he tuned his CB radio to Channel 19 while traveling eastbound on Interstate 70 through the remote plains of Kansas. The 36-year-old owner-operator he had been a professional truck driver for 14 years and was well known in the trucking community for his extensive knowledge of CB radio protocols and his willingness to help other drivers with mechanical advice, traffic information, and weather updates. That night, He was transporting a load of computer equipment for a major electronics retailer, a high-value shipment that required him to follow strict security protocols and adhere to a precise delivery schedule that would get him to his destination. In 18 hours, the I-7 corridor through central Kansas was notorious among truckers for its isolation, with distances of up to 50 miles between truck stops and little cell phone coverage in many places. CB radio communication was crucial for drivers navigating this corridor, providing essential information about road conditions, law enforcement presence. Morrison had driven this route dozens of times and was familiar with the regular voices that frequented Channel 19 during the night, including a few drivers who had casually become acquaintances through years of radio conversations during their respective cross-country journeys. At 9:47 p.m., about 35 miles west of Hays, Kansas, Morrison started receiving what seemed to be routine CB radio traffic from another trucker using the handle Nighthawk. The voice was composed and professional, providing accurate information, a warning about a disabled vehicle on the shoulder near mile marker 184 and the construction zone ahead. Morrison later told investigators that Nighthawk appeared to be just another experienced driver, knowing the road, using CB etiquette, and providing helpful information that other drivers were verifying and thanking him for. His initial communications were normal, but what Morrison couldn't have known was that Nighthawk was actually 31-year-old Gerald Thomas Wickham, a former truck driver who had been fired from 3 different trucking companies for increasingly unpredictable behavior, and who had been using CB for the previous 8 months. The situation escalated at 10:15 p.m. when Nighthawk started asking increasingly personal questions about Morrison's load, his delivery schedule, and whether he was traveling alone. Wickham had devised a sophisticated method of monitoring multiple CB channels simultaneously, gathering information about drivers' locations, cargo, and travel plans before choosing victims who met his specific criteria for potential attacks. Wickham used radio communications to identify and target vulnerable drivers on isolated highway corridors. Morrison recalled, "At first, it seemed like normal trucker conversation, where drivers discuss their freight, their destination, and the type of schedule they're following. However, I became uneasy as he began to inquire about specifics. Precisely what I was transporting, its value, and whether my employer was able to follow my whereabouts in real time. You don't usually hear inquiries like that on the CB." Morrison made an effort to shift the topic and restrict his answers, but Nighthawk continued to ask questions and started giving unsolicited advice on other paths that would Morrison across yet more remote Kansas countryside. Morrison added that he kept advising me to drive south on Highway 183 to avoid what he said was a significant traffic jam up ahead. But no other drivers were reporting any issues on I-70 during the hours I spent watching Channel 19. He grew combative and began threatening drivers who disregarded the counsel of seasoned operators when I questioned him about it. 10:40 p.m. In order to report the suspicious CB radio contacts and get advice regarding the recommended route alterations, Morrison decided to call his dispatcher on his cell phone. But even though he was in an area where coverage is typically sufficient, he found that his cell phone was not receiving any signal when he tried to make the call. At the same time, his CB radio started to interfere so badly with high-pitched electrical noises and heavy static that it was difficult to communicate. Normally, Morrison subsequently testified, "It felt like someone was jamming my communications. I was unable to communicate with other drivers, get in touch with my dispatcher, or find any trustworthy details regarding the upcoming road conditions." After about 20 minutes of the interference, Morrison's CB radio abruptly cleared, and he heard what sounded like a desperate emergency call from another vehicle asking for help. The voice, distinct from Nighthawk's, said that it was a truck driver who required assistance with a mechanical issue since his vehicle had broken down at a rest spot around 15 miles ahead. Morrison remembered that the man sounded really upset. He specifically stated that his cell phone was dead, but his CB was functioning when he asked someone to stop and help him jump-start his truck. The scenario appeared to be a real emergency. Morrison proceeded eastward in the direction of the stranded driver's supposed position. However, he noticed that the rest location indicated in the emergency call seemed to be absolutely deserted, with no disabled truck or person in need of help visible. His discovery that the rest facility had been permanently closed for construction 6 months prior, something that any seasoned motorist who knew the road should have known, was even more unsettling. I realized then that there was a serious problem, Morrison said. Either I was dealing with someone who claimed to be an experienced driver but was unfamiliar with this highway, or someone was purposefully providing me misleading information. The voice of Nighthawk, who was now obviously upset and demanding to know why Morrison hadn't stopped to offer assistance, crackled back to life on his CB radio as he continued past the closed rest area without pausing. "Every one of you truckers is the same." Witcham's voice came through. "You say you watch out for each other, but you just keep driving when someone is in dire need. You'll come to regret that error." Morrison could tell he was being singled out by someone with bad intentions because of the menacing tone and the clear connection between the fictitious emergency call and Nighthawk's earlier correspondence. Morrison tried calling other vehicles on several CB channels right away to alert them to the unusual radio activity and ask for help, but he found that persistent electronic interference was blocking his messages. 11:31 p.m. he was able to call the Kansas Highway Patrol, and he eventually had mobile phone service again to report what seemed to be organized harassment and possible criminal activity targeting truck drivers using CB radios. Conversations. Morrison informed the dispatcher, "I've been driving for 14 years, and I've never encountered anything like this. Our own communication system is being used against us by someone." When Kansas Highway Patrol Trooper Michael Stevens was tasked with looking into Morrison's claim, he soon learned that at least 6 other truck drivers had reported similar experiences while passing through central Kansas in the preceding 2 months. The studies detailed similar trends of phony emergency calls, questionable CB radio contacts, and the electronic interference that seemed intended to isolate vehicles and sway their routes via isolated locations where they would be susceptible to assault. In order to coordinate a multi-jurisdictional investigation into what was being referred to as the CB Predator case, Detective Sarah Williams of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation was brought in. Williams has specific expertise looking into crimes where victims were targeted via radio and electronic communications technology. "What we were witnessing was an extremely complex operation," Williams said. "It wasn't just a stranger pulling practical jokes on truck drivers. This individual had a great deal of experience with CB radio technology, highway systems and trucking sector procedures, who were utilizing the information to open doors for illegal conduct." Witcham had been using a mobile command center, a modified recreational vehicle outfitted with powerful CB radio equipment, signal jammers, and electronic surveillance equipment to monitor and control communications on several channels at once, according to the investigation, in order to evade being discovered by law authorities that might have been looking into his actions. He had been traveling in a circle across multiple states, staying for 2 to 3 weeks in each place before continuing on. Subsequent research revealed evidence that connected Witcham to driver attacks and at least 3 truck hijackings that had taken place in the same regions where his CB radio activity had been reported. In each instance, phony emergency calls were used to entice cars to remote areas, or assurances of help, after which they were ambushed and their personal property and cargo stolen. He had made a weapon out of the mutual aid customs of the trucking community. Detective Williams pointed out that he was taking advantage of drivers' propensity to assist one another in order to open doors for criminal activity. Following an undercover operation in which police agents pretended to be truck drivers and conversed with Wickham over CB radio, which allowed them to identify and locate him, he was taken into custody on September 15, 2001, at a truck stop close to Salina, Kansas. Upon his arrest, Wickham was discovered to have guns, stolen merchandise from many truck hijackings, and thorough notes detailing the routes and timetables of particular drivers he had been pursuing for potential attacks. Gerald Thomas Wickham was found guilty of federal offenses such as conspiracy to commit robbery, assault, and interstate transit of stolen goods. He is presently detained at the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, after being given a 25-year sentence. In federal prison, prosecutors disclosed during Wickham's trial that he had been preparing to grow his operation to include accomplices in other states, forming a criminal network that would coordinate attacks on truck drivers throughout the interstate highway system using CB radio technology. The trucking industry's CB radio security procedures and driver safety training underwent substantial modifications as a result of the Wickham case. While equipment manufacturers started manufacturing CB radios with improved security features, intended to prevent unauthorized interference with legitimate communications, the Federal Communications Commission collaborated with trucking organizations to create guidelines for recognizing and reporting suspicious radio activity, in order to inform drivers about the potential use of social engineering techniques and technological threats by criminals to take advantage of CB radio communications. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association created new training programs. These lessons stress how crucial it is to confirm emergency situations using a variety of sources and to use healthy skepticism when getting unsolicited advice from unfamiliar radio operators regarding route adjustments or aid requests to help truckers and their families who had lost money as a result of highway crimes. A memorial fund was created in remembrance of the drivers who had been harmed by the Wickham scheme, in order to safeguard drivers from potential electronic predators who might try to take advantage of the trucking industry's dependence on radio communications. The fund also funds research into cutting-edge communication security technology. The CB radio murderer case is a sobering reminder that even the most dependable instruments and customs of the trucking industry can be tainted by people with malicious intent, which is especially concerning for truck drivers who still rely on CB radio communications for efficiency and safety on America's highways. The instance illustrated the necessity of ongoing attention to detail and the significance of striking a balance between the mutual aid culture of the trucking industry and exercising the proper caution when interacting with strangers who might not be acting with good intentions. In preparation for a cross-country delivery to a distribution center in Los Angeles, veteran long-haul truck driver Anthony Tony Castellano was loading what he thought was a standard consignment of commercial electronics at a warehouse facility in Newark, New Jersey, on the afternoon of November 17, 2006. With 27 years of commercial driving experience, the 51-year-old owner-operator had established a solid reputation in the industry for discretion and dependability while managing valuable goods that needed stricter security measures. Castellano was an expert in handling confidential cargo for Fortune 500 businesses, and his impeccable record, and he was a favored contractor for loads that other drivers might not be able to carry because of his comprehensive background checks. According to the shipment manifest, Castellano was going to be shipping to $3 million worth of networking equipment and computer servers for a large technology business, with orders to stay away from specified routes and stay in close contact with the shipping company's security department at all times. Castellano was given documents proving that the cargo had been examined and authorized by federal authorities before departure, and the shipment was sealed with several security mechanisms. His Peterbilt 379 from 2004 had satellite tracking, Several its improved security measures and communication systems made it appropriate for moving valuable cargo across the nation. What Castellano didn't know when he left the facility in Newark at 3:47 p.m. was that he had unknowingly joined a complex criminal plot that involved foreign arms traffickers, corrupt government officials, and stolen military equipment that was being transported illegally over state boundaries by reputable trucking businesses. In reality, the computer equipment that was carried inside his caravan included sophisticated night vision technology, encrypted communication devices and radar systems that had been taken from a Virginia military installation and intended for illicit sale to overseas purchasers. At 7:23 p.m., the trick started to fall apart when Castellano discovered that, in spite of the November cold, the back doors of his trailer felt a little warm to the touch when he was at a truck stop in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, getting fuel. Later, Castellano said, "I have hauled goods for 27 years, and I have never had a load that generated its own heat." Although computer equipment is meant to be dormant while being transported, there was unquestionably something operating and generating heat inside that trailer. Vitality. He reported the anomaly to the shipping company's emergency line. And, while it seemed reasonable that some of the equipment needed continual power and climate control, the explanation for why this information hadn't been given during the loading procedure was not given. 9:15 p.m. Castellano's CB radio started hearing communications that weren't being broadcast on any of the typical trucking channels while he was driving west on Interstate 76 through rural Pennsylvania. The conversations seemed to be coded, with people utilizing military-style vocabulary and number sequences to talk about payload requirements and package delivery timeframes that have nothing in common with terms used in commercial transportation. Castellano remembered that these were not truckers speaking. They were talking about my load as if it were a military operation, and they were aware of specifics regarding my itinerary and route that ought to have been kept private. When Castellano noticed that he was being followed by many cars that were keeping exact distances and coordinating their movements in a way that was compatible with expert surveillance operations, the situation took a sharp turn for the worse. Among the cars were two SUVs in black, and even when he changed lanes or varied his cruising pace, the dark automobile that had been following him since he left the truck stop in Pennsylvania kept up with him and remained in formation. Castellano clarified, "I've been driving long enough to know when someone is following me. These were no haphazard tourists. They were specifically following me, and they were doing it in a manner that indicated they had received surveillance technique. Instruction. 10:40 p.m. Castellano chose to depart from his recommended highway and pulled into a brightly illuminated truck stop close to Breezewood, Pennsylvania, to see if he was being paranoid or if the cars were really following him. But just as he started to slow down to get off the road, a call came in on his cell phone from someone posing as the shipping company's representative. The voice wasn't the same as the one I'd heard before. The conversation took a dangerous turn when Castellano asked how the caller knew his exact location and movements. Castellano testified, "This guy knew exactly where I was, knew that I was preparing to stop, and he was very insistent that I continue on my original route without any delays or deviations." Castellano recalled, "He told me that my family's safety depended on me following instructions exactly as given. He gave my home address, called my wife by name, and warned that there would be severe repercussions for any effort to contact the police or alter the delivery timetable. I realized then that I was doing more than just transporting cargo. I was imprisoned by something far more hazardous." Although Castellano was cautious not to bring up the specific threats against his family over the phone, he was able to call the Pennsylvania State Police from the truck stop and ask for help in spite of the threats. At 11:18 p.m., Trooper David Martinez answered the phone. He had an initial interview with Castellano, who gave a meticulously controlled account of what happened, concentrating on the odd radio transmissions and strange cars, but not disclosing the entire scope of the criminal conspiracy he believed. When Trooper Martinez ran the shipping documents and vehicle identification numbers that Castellano had provided, he found inconsistencies that indicated the load might be related to an FBI multi-state criminal investigation already underway, which gave the investigation a federal dimension. Sarah Reeves, a bureau agent at 2:33 a.m., the organized crime task force arrived at the truck stop. They're being contacted with a group of experts versed in dealing with instances involving international arms trafficking and stolen military hardware. For 12 years, Agent Reeves had been looking into criminal conspiracies involving the use of lawful companies as fronts for illicit activity. And she realized at a way how intricate the scheme that had captured Castellano was. This was not an easy in her case report. Reeves described cargo theft. This was a sophisticated criminal organization that had penetrated the transportation sector at several levels, including government organizations, security corporations, and shipping companies. Under the guise of normal trucking activities, they had developed a whole parallel infrastructure for the transportation of illicit weapons. The criminal organization had been utilizing hack shipping companies to deliver stolen military equipment to customers across North America and abroad for at least 3 years, according to the FBI investigation. Logistics planners who organized transit through reputable trucking companies, dishonest staff members at military facilities who supplied intelligence regarding shipments of expensive equipment, and security guards who made sure that police inquiries were redirected or stopped before illegal activity was discovered. $8 was found in the caravan at a forensic examination of Castellano's cargo. $7 million worth of cutting-edge military equipment, including secret radar parts that were illegally transferred to private customers or foreign governments due to stringent export regulations. False information from those who were covertly collaborating with the criminal organization had impeded the investigation into the equipment, which had been reported stolen from Fort Beaver in Virginia 6 months prior. The case got considerably trickier when investigators found that a number of other truck drivers had unknowingly assisted in similar schemes, conveying illicit goods under the pretense of managing genuine commercial shipments. The drivers in each instance had been chosen for their security clearances, spotless backgrounds, and reputation for dependability, which made them perfect for transporting illegal goods without raising red flags with law enforcement that kept an eye on commercial transportation networks. In coordinated raids across 6 states, on March 14, 2007, federal officials apprehended 23 people, breaking up what prosecutors said was one of the biggest military equipment theft gangs in American history. The military officials, executives from shipping companies, security contractors, and foreign arms dealers who had been utilizing the trucking business as a means of transporting stolen technology and weapons were among those arrested. According to the inquiry, the group sold stolen military hardware to purchasers in 12 different nations, generating over $45 million in illicit revenues. Former Army Logistics Officer Colonel Marcus Webb, the conspiracy's main organizer, was found guilty on federal charges of stealing government property, conspiring to commit espionage, and breaking arms export control regulations. Webb received a 35-year term in federal prison and was directed to $15.2 million in reparations to the Defense Department. Prosecutors disclosed during Webb's trial that he had intended to broaden the operation to encompass sensitive weapon systems and nuclear materials, which might have presented serious national security risks. Comprehensive changes to military equipment security standards and background checks for persons with access to key locations were brought about by the Webb conspiracy case. To stop future theft of military technology, the Department of Defense put in place new oversight procedures and new tracking systems for valuable equipment. Additionally, Improved security measures were put in place at shipping companies that manage government contracts, such as stricter inspection protocols and real-time container movement tracking, in order to assist truckers in recognizing potentially suspicious goods and reporting concerns regarding shipments that may entail illicit activity. The American Trucking Associations collaborated with federal law enforcement authorities to create new training programs, understanding cargo documentation, seeing indications of criminal infiltration of shipping operations, and staying in touch with law enforcement when drivers feel they may be involved in illicit transportation activities are all stressed in these training. The Association of Chiefs International, the police created new procedures for looking into incidents where lawful companies are used as fronts for illegal activities, with a focus on how easily organized crime organizations may infiltrate the transportation sector to assist local law enforcement agencies in identifying signs of complex criminal conspiracies and effectively collaborating with federal investigators when such cases were discovered. Training materials were created for truck drivers who had unintentionally participated in illegal transportation schemes. A dedicated victim assistance program was established. This program offered financial aid, counseling, and legal support to drivers whose reputations and careers had suffered as a result of their forced involvement in unlawful actions. The program acknowledged that professional drivers who were involved in criminal conspiracy were frequently victims of illicit activity rather than willing participants. Both the FBI and the Pennsylvania State Police commended Anthony Costigliano for his bravery in reporting suspicious activity and assisting with the investigation in spite of threats on his family. His actions were credited with helping to uncover a criminal conspiracy that had jeopardized national security and stopping the sale of classified military technology to foreign bidders. Costigliano kept on driving professional until his retirement in 2015, but he never again took on shipments involving special clearances or high-security material. The Webb conspiracy case is an important reminder to truck drivers who move sensitive or precious goods throughout America's highway system that even lawful shipments can hide illicit activity, and that drivers need to be on the lookout for the actual type of product they are transporting. Because of drivers' mobility, access to transportation networks, and the widespread belief that commercial vehicles are involved in legitimate business operations, the case showed that criminal organizations target the trucking industry especially. Rebecca Lynn Torres, a seasoned long-haul truck driver, was maneuvering her 2006 on the evening of April 3, 2009, Freightliner Cascadia transporting a load of farm equipment from Nebraska to California along the rugged Interstate 80 in western Wyoming. With 11 years of professional driving experience, the 33-year-old owner-operator was well known in the Rocky Mountain trucking community for her outstanding mechanical expertise and her ability to navigate the most difficult mountain routes, which called for both technical skill and steely nerves. Torres was an expert in moving large construction and agricultural machinery. Additionally, she was a preferred contractor for manufacturers that required their precious equipment transported intact across hazardous terrain because of her impeccable safety record and proficiency in securing complex cargoes. With bright skies, little wind, and temperatures in the mid-40s that offered good vision and road traction, the April evening weather was perfect for driving in the mountains. At 6:30 p.m., Torres had finished her required pre-trip inspection at the Little America truck stop in Wyoming, certifying that her cargo of combine harvesters and tillage equipment was securely fastened in accordance with Department of Transportation requirements, and that all mechanical systems were operating as intended. With rest stops planned in Salt Lake City and Reno, her itinerary would lead her across the difficult grades of the Sierra Nevada mountains before arriving in Fresno, California, the next afternoon. Torres had no idea that she was going to be the most recent casualty of a string of unexplained mechanical malfunctions that had been affecting trucks using this particular section of Interstate 80 for the past 6 months. 8:47 p.m. is she dropped a steep gradient near mile marker 187, some 45 miles west of Rawlins, Wyoming. Torres started to experience what at first seemed to be normal brake fade. Torres later told investigators, "I felt the pedal getting softer, which sometimes happens on long downhill runs. However, nothing happened when I attempted to use the engine brake and downshift. My complete brake system seemed to have been disabled when I was operating a vehicle." When Torres discovered that her emergency braking system, engine brake, and air brakes had all failed at once, the situation quickly became more serious. A mechanical impossibility in normal conditions that implied intentional sabotage instead of ordinary equipment failure. Now, her £80,000 combo car was speeding out of control down a 6% incline with she was unable to slow down or stop the truck due to the abrupt turn at the bottom. Torres attested, "I've been driving for 11 years, and I know these mountains like the back of my hand. My truck wasn't experiencing a mechanical issue. While I was driving, it seemed as though someone had methodically turned off all of the safety features, using the steep uphill gravel bed to gradually disperse her velocity and bring the vehicle to a stop." Torres used her vast knowledge of emergency procedures and mountain driving skills to steer the rogue truck into the emergency runaway ramp at mile marker 185, because a mistake could have resulted in the truck rolling over or jackknifing, which could have been disastrous. The maneuver required remarkable expertise and perfect timing. "I think I had about 30 seconds to decide between riding it out to the bottom of the slope or using the runaway ramp. Within 20 minutes, emergency personnel, including Wyoming Highway Patrol Trooper Michael Davidson and a Department of Transportation Commercial Vehicle Inspection team, arrived at the scene." Torres recalled, "If I had missed that ramp, or if it hadn't been there, I would have died in that curve at the bottom of the grade." The first mechanical examination showed that Torres' truck had been sabotaged using complex techniques that necessitated access to specialized tools that were not typically available to the general public and in-depth understanding of commercial vehicle braking systems. According to Inspector James Mitchell, someone had tampered with the electronic controls for her engine brake and purposefully cut off the airline's connection to her brake system. This vandalism wasn't haphazard. An intentional attempt was made to induce a tragic accident. When Trooper Davidson learnt that Torres was the 8th truck driver to encounter unexplained brake failures on the road, the inquiry became even more urgent. This particular I-80 segment throughout the preceding 6 months, when drivers lost control of their vehicles on the steep mountain grades, 3 of the prior events had resulted in fatal accidents, and 2 others had caused significant injuries. We were examining a trend of what seemed to be intentional sabotage directed against commercial trucks. Davidson mentioned this in his report on the incident. On one of the most hazardous highways in the western United States, a person with a great deal of mechanical expertise was targeting trucks in a systematic manner. The Wyoming Criminal Investigation Division's Detective Sarah Chen was tasked with spearheading an extensive investigation into the case known as the I-80 saboteur. In addition to having 14 years of expertise looking into intricate criminal cases, Chen also had specific training in forensic analysis of mechanical evidence. The fact that the sabotage was being done in methods that at first glance seemed to be ordinary mechanical faults made this case more difficult. Chen clarified that the offender was aware that unless they carried out extremely thorough forensic analyses of the evidence, investigators would inevitably conclude that these were accidents. After broadening their examination to encompass all truck-related incidents and mechanical malfunctions documented along the I-80 corridor in the preceding 2 years, the investigative team found an unsettling trend of events that were routinely mislabeled as normal equipment malfunctions. Similar techniques had been used in each instance to sabotage the impacted vehicles, severing brake lines, turning off electronic systems, and loosening steering parts in ways that would have resulted in catastrophic breakdowns while driving on the highway. Given the complexity of the sabotage, it seemed likely that the offender had access to the secure locations where trucks were parked overnight and had received substantial expertise in commercial vehicle repair. The criminal was employing specialized tools and tactics that were in line with training gained by police enforcement, military mechanics, or commercial vehicle specialists. According to forensic analysis of the sabotage methods, law enforcement officials skilled in the inspection processes for commercial vehicles. This was not a person who had studied a handbook on truck mechanics. Detective Chen pointed out that this individual had expert-level expertise and knew exactly how to turn off safety features in ways that would do the most harm while seeming like unintentional malfunctions. Investigators found that all of the sabotaged vehicles had been parked overnight at truck stops or rest areas within a 50-mile radius of Laram, Wyoming, and that the attacks were happening in a predictable pattern that indicated the perpetrator was following a regular schedule or route. This information significantly changed the course of the case. Multiple truck stops worth of surveillance film of the presence of a suspicious person who had been seen close to a number of the targeted cars in the hours before to their mechanical failures. The investigative breakthrough occurred when the suspect was identified as Dennis Ray Hutchins, 41, a former military mechanic who had been dishonorably discharged from the Army for stealing government property. He had previously worked for a number of commercial trucking companies before being fired for unpredictable behavior and conflicts with co-workers. This was done through enhanced analysis of security camera footage. Hutchins had access to the specialized equipment needed to execute the complex sabotage that had been uncovered, as well as a thorough understanding of commercial vehicle systems. Hutchins had a strong dislike for the trucking industry, according to additional research, after he blamed truck drivers and trucking corporations for a slew of personal and professional disappointments. In 2007, he was injured and faced financial troubles after being engaged in an accident with a commercial truck. And because of his history of confrontations with co-workers and bosses, as well as his increasingly erratic behavior, he has since been unable to hold down a permanent job in the transportation sector. Surveillance teams saw Hutchins trying to destroy another commercial vehicle at a truck stop outside of Cheyenne, Wyoming, on June 15, 2009, leading to his arrest. Hutchins was discovered to be in possession when he was taken into custody, including a notepad with the license plate numbers and descriptions of dozens of vehicles that he had reportedly been targeting for future attacks, specialized tools, and intricate schematics of commercial vehicle braking systems. He was conclusively connected to sabotage evidence discovered at several crime locations by DNA evidence. Dennis Ray Hutchins was found guilty on federal charges of conspiracy to conduct terrorism, causing accidents that resulted in death, and destroying motor vehicles. He is presently detained at the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence, Colorado, where he was given a life sentence without the possibility of release. At his trial, the prosecution disclosed that Hutchins had been preparing to broaden the scope of his sabotage attempt to encompass public transport and passenger cars, putting thousands of innocent travelers at risk. In the western United States, the Hutchins case led to extensive changes in commercial vehicle inspection practices and truck stop security measures. In order to improve monitoring at truck parking facilities and create quick response protocols for looking into questionable technical failures that could be signs of sabotage, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration collaborated with state law enforcement organizations to assist drivers in spotting indications of vehicle tampering and identifying odd behavior. The American Trucking Associations created additional training courses, mechanical signs that could point to sabotage, of normal equipment failure. These initiatives stress the value of doing comprehensive pre-trip inspections and promptly notifying law enforcement of any indications of unauthorized access to vehicle systems. in recognition of the drivers who perished as a result of Hutchins's sabotage effort. A memorial fund was created to stimulate research into cutting-edge security technology that could help shield commercial vehicles against similar attacks, and to give financial support to their families. Annual safety workshops aimed at detecting and averting intentional sabotage of transportation equipment are also sponsored by the fund. The American Trucking Associations and the Wyoming Highway Patrol recognized Rebecca Torres for her ability to manage the incident and her collaboration with the inquiry that resulted in Hutchins's arrest. In addition to saving her own life, her quick thinking and mechanical know-how helped uncover a criminal plot that, had it gone unnoticed, could have claimed many more victims. The I-80 Saboteur case serves as a sobering reminder to truck drivers who still traverse America's treacherous mountain routes that not all mechanical breakdowns are unintentional, and that vehicle security awareness is just as crucial as conventional safety procedures. The example illustrated how the trucking industry's dependence on public overnight parking facilities results in vulnerabilities that people with technical expertise and malevolent intent can take advantage of. James Robert Big Jim Henderson, a seasoned long-haul truck driver, was nearing the conclusion of a taxing 3-day trip from Houston to Seattle on the evening of July 28, 2012, when he pulled into the Midnight Junction Truck Plaza, a 24-hour establishment situated on a barren section of Interstate 84 in southeast Oregon. With 23 years of professional driving experience, the 47-year-old owner-operator was well known in the Pacific Northwest trucking community for his extensive understanding of local customs and his unwavering dedication to safety, which had won him numerous industry awards for driving without an accident. He was delivering a high-priority shipment of pharmaceutical supplies for a significant medical distributor that evening, a temperature-controlled shipment that needed to be handled carefully and delivered according to stringent timetables so that he may reach his destination in 12 hours. With 60 parking spots, contemporary fuel islands, a full-service restaurant, showers, and a convenience store designed especially to meet the needs of long-distance drivers traversing the difficult mountain corridors of the Columbia River Gorge. The Midnight Junction Truck Plaza was a relatively new establishment that had only been open for 18 months. Henderson had made multiple visits to the facility in the past year and had always found it to be professionally run, well-maintained, and friendly, with cheap gasoline pricing that made it a favorite destination for truckers looking for a secure spot to relax during required breaks. At 11:47 p.m., Henderson backed his 2009 Volvo VNL into parking place 43 without realizing what he was doing. Was that a sophisticated criminal organization that had been routinely targeting truck drivers for robberies, kidnappings, and human trafficking activities had its operational headquarters at the Midnight Junction Truck Plaza. The facility's lawful commercial activities served as the ideal cover for illegal activity, enabling the group to locate valuable cargo, examine driver routes and schedules, and choose victims who could be attacked with little chance of being found right away. At 12:23 a.m., the first sign that anything was amiss appeared. When Henderson saw that, in spite of the late hour, an abnormally high number of individuals who didn't seem to be truck drivers or actual consumers were moving about the parking lot. I've been stopping at truck plazas for over 20 years, and you develop a sense for the normal rhythm of these places, Henderson said in testimony afterwards. The pattern didn't match what I was observing. Henderson's suspicions were heightened when he noticed that a number of people were using advanced electronic equipment to scan trucks in the parking area, seemingly gathering information about cargo types, security systems, and driver schedules, and that the scanning operation was being carried out systematically with teams of 2 or 3 people working their way through the parking rows, while maintaining communication via handheld radios. Henderson recalled that these individuals were not lot lizards or casual thieves, but rather were observing other drivers, taking notes about trucks and cargo, and moving around in a coordinated manner that suggested they were working together. These were individuals with professional-grade gear who knew exactly what they were looking for and how to find it without attracting the attention of bystanders. At 12:51 a.m., Henderson made the decision to look into the matter further and made his way towards the main building to watch the activities more closely. He found that, despite their efforts to blend in with the legitimate customers, a number of customers were having conversations inside the convenience store. That used trucking term in the situation escalated when Henderson tried to buy fuel and found that the electronic payment system was set up to collect far more information than needed for a straightforward transaction, with the fuel island terminals requesting driver's license numbers, social security numbers, and detailed cargo documentation that had no legitimate business purpose but would give criminals comprehensive intelligence about potential victims. They wanted to know everything about me, my truck, my load, and ... Henderson decided to leave the facility right away, but when he got back to his truck, he found that his trailer's security seals had been tampered with, that some boxes had been moved inside his cargo area, and that a small electronic device had been attached to the frame of his truck, seemingly to track his movements after he left the facility. They had been inside my trailer while I was in the store, Henderson testified, and they had found whatever they were looking for, and now they were. As Henderson got ready to leave, several cars in the parking lot started their engines at the same time, and he became aware that he was going to be followed by what seemed to be a coordinated surveillance team. Instead of trying to escape, Henderson used his CB radio to call other nearby drivers and learnt that a number of truckers had encountered similar suspicious activity at the Midnight Junction facility in the preceding months, but none had called the police because they were unsure of what they had seen. At 1:34 a.m., Henderson called the when Trooper Lisa Rodriguez arrived at the Midnight Junction facility at 2:07 a.m. with backup units to investigate Henderson's report. It was immediately clear that something unusual was happening. He called Oregon State Police from his truck, reported the suspicious activities he had seen, asked for immediate assistance, and stated that he thought he was being targeted for criminal activity. Rodriguez later explained, there were far too many vehicles in the parking area for the number of legitimate customers, and several people tried to leave the facility as soon as they saw our patrol cars. The preliminary inquiry showed that the Midnight Junction truck plaza was owned and run by a shell company that had ties to known criminal groups that were involved in drug distribution, human trafficking, and cargo theft throughout the Pacific Northwest. Although the facility had a valid business license and permits, its operations went far beyond providing standard truck stop services, with hidden surveillance equipment installed throughout the building and parking lot to collect information about valuable cargo, and what we found was essentially a criminal intelligence gathering operation disguised as a truck stop. According to Forster's case files, they were using their position as a service provider to systematically identify and target victims throughout the regional transportation network. The criminal organization had been operating for at least 2 years, during which time they had gathered detailed intelligence on hundreds of truck drivers and cargo shipments passing through their facility. Forster's cargo thefts, driver kidnappings, and human trafficking operations were being coordinated across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, and victims were chosen based on the value of their cargo, their routes of travel, and their susceptibility to attack in remote locations where criminal activity could be carried out without immediate detection. Subsequent investigation revealed evidence that the organization had been involved in at least 15 cargo thefts totaling more than $8 million, as well as the kidnapping and trafficking of 12 people identified as potential victims through the truck stop intelligence operation. The criminal network included dishonest employees at shipping companies who supplied advanced information about valuable cargo. On September 12, 2012, federal agents carried out coordinated raids at 23 locations across 4 states, leading to the arrest of 31 individuals involved in the Midnight Junction criminal conspiracy, including the facility's ownership and management, employees who had been collecting intelligence on truck drivers, and criminal associates who had been conducting the thefts and trafficking operations based on information obtained at the truck stop. The arrests included law enforcement officials who misdirected investigations and international criminal organizations that bought stolen goods and traffic victims. Prosecutors disclosed during the trial that former trucking company executive Marcus Dale Whitfield had been planning to expand the operation to include truck stops throughout the western United States, creating a network of criminal intelligence gathering facilities that could have jeopardized the security of the entire regional transportation system. Whitfield was found guilty on federal charges of racketeering, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit robbery, and was sentenced to 40 years. The International Association of Truck Stop Operators implemented new training programs for employees to help them identify and report potential criminal activities being conducted at their facilities. These programs emphasize the importance of protecting driver privacy and maintaining secure handling of cargo and schedule information that could be exploited by criminal organizations. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration collaborated with state law enforcement agencies to develop the Oregon State Police, and the American Trucking Associations commended James Henderson for his diligence in spotting the illegal activity at the Midnight Junction facility and his bravery in reporting his concerns despite the possibility of retaliation from the criminal organization. A specialized victim assistance program was established for truck drivers and their families who had been impacted by the Midnight Junction conspiracy, offering financial support, counseling services, and enhanced security measures for drivers who had been targeted by the criminal organization. The program also supported research into advanced security technologies that could help protect drivers and cargo from similar criminal enterprises. Truck drivers who rely on truck stops and rest areas for safe parking and essential services during their journeys across America's highway system will find the Midnight Junction case to be a sobering reminder that even seemingly legitimate businesses can conceal dangerous criminal operations. The Midnight Junction Truck Plaza was permanently closed after the federal investigation, and the property was seized as evidence in the criminal case. A memorial marker was erected at the site honoring T.H. Patricia Patty Sue Williams, a veteran long-haul trucker, was getting ready to leave a truck stop in Oklahoma City on January 15, 2014, for what should have been a routine delivery of auto parts to Detroit, Michigan, when she received an unexpected call from her dispatcher, H. Heartland Express Logistics, asking for an immediate route change. Williams, 39, had been working exclusively with H. Heartland for 6 years and had a close professional relationship with dispatcher Michelle Torres, who had the original plan would have taken Williams straight north through Kansas and Missouri on Interstate 35, a well-known route she had driven hundreds of times during her 16-year trucking career. But Torres insisted that severe weather and numerous accidents had rendered the interstate impassable, so Williams needed to take an alternate route through rural Arkansas and Tennessee that would add about 200 meters to her journey, but avoid the dangerous conditions ahead. Michelle had never led me astray before, and Williams later testified that she always had good information about road conditions and I trusted her judgment completely. Williams didn't know that Michelle Torres had been working covertly with a criminal organization for more than 8 months, using her job as a dispatcher to identify valuable cargo and direct unsuspecting drivers into remote areas where they could be robbed, assaulted, or killed by associates waiting along predetermined routes. Torres had access to detailed information about every load that passed through H. Heartland Express Logistics, including cargo values, delivery schedules, and driver profiles that made it possible to select the most profitable targets and plan attacks with little chance of being discovered right away. At 2:47 p.m., about 30 miles north of Hot Springs, Arkansas. Williams started experiencing what seemed to be engine problems when her 2010 Peterbilt 389 started losing power and making strange noises from the motor compartment. I've been driving trucks for 16 years, and I know the sound of every component in my engine, Williams told investigators. The alternate route tourists provided took Williams southeast through the Ouachita Mountains of Arkansas, a sparsely populated area with limited cell phone coverage and few commercial establishments where a driver in distress might seek assistance. It sounded like someone had put something in my fuel system that was making the engine run rough and lose compression, which is not what I was hearing. Williams was able to convince her truck to go to a small roadside diner called the Mountain View Cafe on Highway 7 near the town of Jessville, where she hoped to diagnose the mechanical issue and call her dispatcher for help. But when she tried to call Torres, she found that her cell phone was not receiving any signal, even though she was in an area where coverage was normally adequate. The diner's landline was reportedly out of service, and the owner said that their internet connection had been down. For the situation worsened when Williams realized that a number of people at the diner appeared to be observing her truck and cargo with unusual interest, asking specific questions about her load and destination that were not appropriate for casual conversation. These weren't typical small-town folks being friendly, Williams recalled. They were people who knew trucking terminology and were asking specific questions about my cargo documentation, delivery schedule, and whether anyone was expecting me at a particular time. It felt like they were gathering intelligence about whether I, despite her truck's mechanical issues. Williams decided to leave the Mountain View Cafe for 23 p.m., believing that staying there would be more dangerous than trying to drive with a broken engine. However, just as she was about to leave, she found that someone had tampered with the brake lines on her trailer, and that her truck's fuel tank had been contaminated with a substance that was seriously damaging her engine. Someone sabotaged my truck while I was inside the diner, Williams testified. They had put something in my fuel tank that was destroying my engine from the inside, and they had partially cut my brake lines so they would fail gradually. Williams was able to use her CB radio to call the Arkansas State Police, requesting immediate assistance and reporting that she was being targeted for what seemed to be a coordinated criminal attack. Trooper Mark Johnson arrived at the Mountain View Cafe 5:07 p.m. to find her truck disabled and a number of suspicious people nearby who claimed to be providing mechanical assistance, but who actually had. We were looking at a pattern of crimes that involved inside information from trucking companies. Trooper Johnson's investigation started right away when he learnt that Williams was the fourth truck driver in 6 months to have mysterious mechanical failures in the same geographic area after being steered to alternate routes by dispatchers from different trucking companies. In each of the previous cases, the affected drivers had been robbed of their cargo and personal belongings, and who had been seriously injured during the attacks. Johnson wrote in his incident report that someone with access to dispatch systems was purposefully sending drivers into areas where they could be attacked by Detective Sandra Martinez of the Arkansas State Police Criminal Investigation Division, was tasked with spearheading a thorough investigation into what was being called the dispatcher conspiracy case. With 13 years of experience looking into intricate criminal enterprises and specialized training in cases involving corruption in transportation and logistics companies, Martinez explained that the criminals were taking advantage of the trust relationship between drivers and their dispatchers, which additionally, as that bond is weakened, it leaves gaps that could be used for illegal activities. Following a divorce and custody battle that left her deeply indebted, the investigation found that Michelle Torres had been recruited by the criminal organization. The criminals offered her $5,000 for each valuable load she directed to their designated attack locations, and they gave her detailed intelligence on law enforcement patrol schedules and communication protocols that allowed the attacks to be carried out without being detected right away. According to forensic analysis of Torres's computer and phone records, he was part of a larger network of corrupted dispatchers who worked for trucking companies across the Midwest and South, all of whom had been recruited by the same criminal organization using similar methods of financial pressure and intimidation. The network was responsible for at least 27 cargo thefts totaling over $6 to $2 million, as well as numerous assaults and robberies of truck drivers who had been purposefully led into dangerous situations by dispatchers they trusted. Investigators found that the criminal organization had been using the corrupted dispatcher network to identify female drivers traveling alone, elderly drivers who might be less able to defend themselves, and drivers carrying high-value cargo, like electronics, pharmaceuticals, or luxury goods, to essentially turn the dispatching system into a victim selection and delivery service. The records revealed that Torres had been giving the criminal organization time information about driver locations, allowing attackers to position themselves along alternate routes and wait for their victims to arrive at predetermined ambush sites. Michelle Torres pleaded guilty to federal charges, including conspiracy to commit robbery, wire fraud, and racketeering. The trucking industry's own infrastructure was used to identify and attack the most vulnerable members of the driving community. On April 22, 2014, federal agents conducted coordinated raids at 16 locations across 7 states, leading to the arrest of 19 individuals connected to the dispatcher conspiracy, including corrupted employees at 8 different trucking companies. The arrests disrupted a criminal network that had produced millions of dollars in illegal profits through the systematic exploitation of the trucking industry's dispatch systems. The main organizer of the dispatcher conspiracy, former trucking company executive Robert Dale Morrison, was found guilty on federal charges of racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Torres confessed to authorities, providing them with specific information about the methods and future plans of the criminal organization, which helped investigators prevent additional attacks that were planned to take place. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $850,000 in restitution to victims of the criminal conspiracy. The Torres case led to extensive reforms in dispatcher security protocols and background screening procedures throughout the trucking industry, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration collaborated with trucking companies to implement new oversight systems for dispatch communications, including random monitoring of dispatcher-driver conversations and enhanced verification. Morrison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and is currently incarcerated at the International Brotherhood of Teamsters established a specialized support program for truck drivers who had been harmed by corrupted dispatchers, offering financial support, counseling services, and legal assistance to drivers whose careers and livelihoods had been ruined by criminal exploitation. The American Trucking Associations created new training programs for dispatchers to help them identify and thwart recruitment attempts by criminal organizations, and also set up anonymous reporting systems for employees who suspected criminal infiltration of their companies. These programs emphasize the critical importance of maintaining the trust relationship between dispatchers and drivers, and the devastating consequences that could result from corrupted dispatchers. A memorial fund was established in honor of the drivers who lost their lives as a result of the program, which also promoted improved security measures and compensation plans to protect drivers from future dispatch system coordinated attacks. Patricia Williams was recognized by the Arkansas State Police and the American Trucking Associations for her prompt recognition of the criminal attack and her cooperation with the investigation that revealed the dispatcher conspiracy. Her survival and testimony were essential, helping law enforcement understand the tactics used by the criminal organization and in developing prevention strategies to protect other drivers from similar attacks. As a chilling reminder that even the most trusted relationships within the trucking industry can be corrupted by criminal organizations seeking to exploit drivers for profit. The dispatcher conspiracy case highlights the critical importance of maintaining verification procedures for unusual routing changes and the need for ongoing training seminars aimed at identifying and preventing criminal infiltration of transportation companies for truck drivers who rely on dispatchers for reliable routing. Continual attention to communications that could jeopardize driver safety and security. On the humid evening of September 9, 2016, while hauling a load of manufactured goods from Dallas to Mexico City, veteran long-haul trucker David Michael Big Dave Rodriguez was approaching the mandatory weigh station on Interstate 35 near Laredo, Texas, when he noticed that the facility's electronic signs were instructing all commercial vehicles to report for inspection. Despite the late hour and usually low star, Rodriguez had been through this particular inspection station countless times and was familiar with its normal operating procedures, staffing patterns, and the typical duration of inspections based on cargo type and vehicle configuration. It was a routine cross-border delivery that he had completed dozens of times without incident over his nearly two-decade career. The Laredo Northway Station was a state-of-the-art facility that had been upgraded with modern electronic screening equipment designed to expedite the inspection process while maintaining strict enforcement of commercial vehicle safety regulations. Rodriguez was unaware that the Laredo Northway Station had been infiltrated by a sophisticated criminal organization that had been using the facility's legitimate inspection authority to identify and target valuable cargo for theft, smuggling, and human trafficking activities. He noticed right away that the facility was operating with an unusually large number of personnel for the overnight shift, and that several of the inspection officers were not wearing standard Department of Public Safety uniforms. The criminals had installed their own personnel at the facility and recruited corrupt inspection officers, creating a system that allowed them to detain drivers under the guise of routine inspections while conducting criminal planning and intelligence gathering operations that were illegal under both state and federal law. Rodriguez later told investigators, "This guy was asking about the value of my goods, who was paying for the shipment, whether I was carrying any cash, and how long I expected to be in Mexico." Rodriguez had never seen Inspector Thomas Valdez before, despite his frequent trips through the facility, but he started asking unusually detailed questions about Rodriguez's cargo destination and the specific companies involved in the international shipping transaction. Normally, inspections focus on those aren't typical questions for an inspection. They were going through every inch of my truck like they were looking for something specific, pulling out boxes, photographing cargo labels, and even opening sealed packages that should have been left alone during a routine inspection. The inspection process lasted more than 2 hours, far longer than was necessary for routine compliance verification, while other personnel conducted what appeared to be unauthorized searches of Rodriguez's truck and trailer. Rodriguez testified that he saw oath when Rodriguez questioned the legality of the inspection officer's photocopying of his shipping documents, driver's license and commercial driver's license at 1:47 a.m. He became increasingly concerned because it appeared that they were creating unauthorized records of his personal information and cargo details. Inspector Valdez became defensive and threatened to detain Rodriguez's vehicle for further inspection if he continued to object to their methods. Rodriguez recalled, "The situation escalated when Rodriguez overheard radio communications between the inspection officers that showed they were coordinating with people outside the facility who were apparently planning to intercept his truck where he left the weigh station. The communications included specific details about Rodriguez's route, cargo value, and estimated arrival time at the border crossing. These details had no legitimate purpose in a routine vehicle inspection, but would be extremely valuable to criminals planning a cargo theft or hijacking operation. They were using their authority to intimidate me into compliance while they gathered intelligence about my load and my business operations. Decided to use his cell phone to call his dispatcher to report the suspicious activities at the way station, but found that his phone was not receiving any signal even though it was in an area with normally excellent coverage. When he tried to make an emergency call using the facility's landline, he was informed that the phone system was temporarily out of service, effectively cutting off his communication with the outside world. They had isolated me completely. Rodriguez explained, I couldn't call for help, couldn't contact my company, and couldn't verify whether what they were doing was legal or authorized. At 2:34 in the morning, Rodriguez was at last released from the way station, following what Inspector Valdez said was a successful completion of the inspection process. Despite the fact that no violations had been found and no official documentation of the inspection had been provided, Rodriguez was about to leave when he noticed that a pickup truck and a dark SUV had been parked near the facility's exit ramp, and that the occupants seemed to be keeping an eye on his movements while keeping radio contact with personnel inside. The way started at 3:15 a.m. Rodriguez called the Texas Department of Public Safety from the truck stop, reporting that he thought he had been the victim of an unauthorized inspection, and that he was now being followed by people who seemed to be planning a criminal attack. Trooper Maria Gonzalez was the first to arrive at the truck stop, arriving at 3:41 a.m., but as he had suspected, the way station vehicles started to follow him, keeping a discreet distance while seemingly coordinating their surveillance through radio communications that Rodriguez could occasionally hear his CB radio scanner. The Texas Department of Public Safety Criminal Investigation Division assigned Detective Robert Chen, who had 14 years of experience investigating corruption within state agencies and specialized training in cases involving the abuse of government authority for criminal purposes, to lead a thorough investigation into Rodriguez's allegations and the possible infiltration of state inspection facilities by criminal organizations. To interview Rodriguez and look into his claims regarding criminal activities at the Laredo Northway station. If criminals had actually infiltrated a stateway station, it represented a serious threat to both public safety and the integrity of our transportation enforcement system. Chen wrote in his case files, referring to the systematic corruption of the inspection process that Rodriguez outlined. According to the investigation, a criminal organization had been infiltrating the Laredo Northway station for more than 15 months. During that time, corrupted inspection officers had been collecting intelligence on valuable cargo and giving it to criminal associates who used the information to carry out smuggling, theft, and hijackings. Utilizing intelligence obtained at the corrupt way station, the criminals were able to identify drivers who were transporting valuable cargo, traveling alone, or following routes that would take them through isolated areas where attacks could be carried out without immediate detection. Through bribery and intimidation, they recruited corrupt employees and placed their own personnel in positions that gave them access to commercial vehicle traffic and inspection records. Subsequent investigation revealed evidence that the criminal organization had been responsible for at least 23 cargo thefts, valued at over $14.7 million, as well as multiple smuggling operations that had transported drugs, weapons, and victims of human trafficking across the US-Mexico border. The criminal organization had been systematically targeting drivers based on certain criteria, such as cargo value, driver vulnerability, and the likelihood that criminal activities could be carried out without prompt law enforcement response. According to forensic analysis of surveillance footage and inspection records, the organization had created detailed profiles of regular drivers on the Laredo corridor and had been planning increasingly complex attacks using intelligence obtained through their infiltration of the way station. On November 18, 2016, federal agents conducted coordinated raids at 12 locations across Texas and Mexico, leading to the arrest of 27 people involved in the way station conspiracy, including corrupted inspection officers, criminal coordinators, and associates who had been smuggling and stealing. Inspector Thomas Valdez and two other corrupted inspection officers were found guilty on federal charges of conspiracy to commit robbery, abuse of authority under color of law, and violation of civil rights. The investigation found links to major drug cartels and international criminal organizations that had been using the corrupted inspection facility as a key component of their cross-border criminal operations. Valdez was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison and was required to pay $2.3 million in restitution to victims of the criminal conspiracy. The main organizer of the way station conspiracy, former cartel associate Miguel Santos Rivera, was found guilty on federal charges of racketeering, human trafficking, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Rivera was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence Supermax Prison in Colorado. During his confession, Valdez disclosed the methods the criminal organization used to recruit corrupt employees and provided information that helped authorities identify additional compromised facilities in other states. The Laredo Way Station case led to extensive reforms in inspection facility security protocols and employee background screening procedures throughout Texas and neighboring states. The International Association of Chiefs of Police created new training programs for law enforcement officers to help them spot signs of corruption within transportation enforcement facilities and spot odd patterns in inspection activities that could point to criminal infiltration. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Admini, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation commended David Rodriguez for his bravery in reporting the suspicious activities at the Laredo Way Station and his cooperation with the investigation that exposed the criminal conspiracy. These programs highlight the importance of preserving the integrity of government inspection authority and safeguarding the public's trust in transportation safety enforcement. A specialized victim assistance program was established after the Laredo Way Station case serves as a stark reminder that even government facilities entrusted with public safety can be corrupted by criminal organizations seeking to exploit the transportation system for illegal purposes. The case may have prevented him from becoming another victim of the criminal organization and helped prevent numerous future attacks against other drivers. The case demonstrated the critical importance of questioning unusual inspection procedures and reporting suspicious AC in preparation for the Christmas holiday shutdown. Bill Thompson, a 58-year-old owner-operator who had been driving professionally for 34 years, was starting what would be his last cross-country delivery, a high-priority shipment of medical equipment from Boston to Los Angeles. Thompson was considered to be one of the most dependable and experienced drivers in the Northeast trucking community, known for his ability to complete difficult deliveries in the most difficult conditions and his extensive knowledge of alternate routes that could avoid traffic jams and weather delays. Thompson planned to retire after this delivery, marking his final run after more than 30 years of service. Thompson's 2015 Peterbilt 579 was outfitted with temperature-controlled trailer systems and enhanced security features necessary for transporting sensitive medical cargo, and his flawless safety record and specialized certifications had made him the preferred contractor for this type of high-value time shipment that required both technical expertise and transportation expertise. The shipment included critical diagnostic equipment, headed for 3 major hospitals in the Los Angeles metropolitan. Thompson had meticulously planned his route to avoid the worst of the storm, intending to travel through the southern corridor via Interstate 40 through Tennessee, Arkansas, and Oklahoma before heading southwest towards his final destination. The weather conditions that December evening were especially dangerous, with a massive winter storm system moving across the Midwest that was producing heavy snow, ice, and wind gusts exceeding 50 miles per hour in many areas. He left the medical supply facility in Waltham, Massachusetts, at 6:47 p.m., with an estimated arrival time in Los Angeles on December 25th at 2 o'clock. Thompson could not have predicted that he would soon be the target of Marcus Dale, the surgeon Patterson, a deranged former medical technician who had been stalking medical transport vehicles for more than 2 years as part of a twisted obsession with acquiring advanced medical equipment for his own disturbed purposes. P.M. giving him enough time for holiday deliveries while adhering to safe driving practices. Patterson had lost his job at a hospital in the Boston area in 2016, and it was discovered that he had stolen pharmaceuticals and medical devices, and his subsequent mental decline had caused him to develop a complex fantasy. When Thompson stopped for fuel at a truck stop in Hartford, Connecticut, at 9:23 p.m., after operating an underground medical facility where he performed unauthorized procedures on kidnapped victims, he noticed a white panel van that had been following him since leaving Massachusetts. The van kept a steady distance behind Thompson's truck and seemed to be driven by someone who was familiar with commercial vehicle traffic patterns and highway surveillance techniques. After 34 years of driving, this van had been behind me for more than 2 hours, maintaining the exact same distance and speed, never passing, never falling back, Thompson subsequently told police, demonstrating his sick feeling about when someone is following them. That isn't how drivers often behave. Thompson's worries increased when he saw the driver of the van using what looked like professional surveillance equipment to keep an eye on his truck and its contents. During his travels through Connecticut and New York, Thompson saw the van's occupant using a telephoto camera and binoculars to take pictures of his car, license plates, and trailer markings. This wasn't road rage or casual interest, Thompson recalled. This was someone conducting systematic surveillance of my truck and cargo, like they were gathering intelligence for some kind of operation. At 11:47 p.m., while driving through Pennsylvania on Interstate 380, Thompson decided to call his dispatcher to report the suspicious surveillance and ask for advice on whether to involve law enforcement. However, when he tried to use his cell phone, he found that he was receiving threatening text messages from and the sender knew that Thompson was transporting medical equipment valued at over $3.2 million and that he intended to retire following this delivery. The texts, which came from an unknown number, became more and more unsettling as they disclosed that Patterson had been keeping tabs on Thompson's communications with his dispatcher and had somehow obtained access to confidential shipping information, including cargo manifests, delivery schedules, and security protocols. The man knew everything about my load, my route, my personal history, and my cargo. The situation escalated at 1:34 a.m. on December 23rd when Thompson stopped at a rest area near Scranton, Pennsylvania, to conduct his required break period and found that someone had tampered with his trailer's locking mechanisms, replacing the sophisticated security seals with identical ones. Thompson testified that he was sending me messages, saying that this was going to be my final delivery in more ways than I realized, and that he had been planning this 4 months. Patterson had been inside my trailer, Thompson told investigators, and he knew exactly what I was carrying, and he had been planning how to steal it without me realizing what was happening. Thompson immediately called the Pennsylvania State Police and reported that he was being stalked by someone who had gained unauthorized access to his cargo and was making threatening communications about his planned delivery. Trooper Jennifer Walsh responded to Thompson's call to 1 a.m. and conducted an in. What we found was a person who had developed a dangerous fixation on medical equipment and the drivers who transported it. Detective Michael Forster of the Pennsylvania State Police Major Crimes Unit, who had 18 years of experience investigating cases involving obsessive behavior and specialized training in crimes targeting the healthcare and transportation industries, was assigned to lead the investigation into what was being called the medical stalker case after Patterson's van was found. Patterson had been preparing this attack for months, researching Thompson's background and creating complex plans to steal the medical cargo, according to his case papers. According to the inquiry, Patterson had been using his van to run what he said was a mobile surgical center. He had obtained the monitoring equipment and medical tools from prior medical transport truck robberies. He organized thefts based on thorough intelligence regarding shipment values and security protocols, targeted drivers who delivered high V-value medical equipment, and conducted surveillance activities that allowed him to identify cargo contents. Subsequent research revealed that, during the preceding 18 months, Patterson was accountable for at least 8 cargo thefts involving medical transport vehicles, theft of pharmaceutical supplies, surgical instruments, and diagnostic equipment valued at more than $12 million. Patterson had been performing unsafe and illegal treatments on people he had abducted from hospitals and homeless shelters, using the stolen equipment in his delusional medical business. Detailed surveillance records for dozens of medical transport drivers, including photos, route data, and cargo manifests, were found during forensic examination of Patterson's van and personal belongings. He had gained these documents by infiltrating shipping companies and medical supply facilities. The most unsettling finding was a hit list that included the names and private data of 15 drivers Patterson had named as top targets for upcoming assaults. Thompson's name is shown as the final acquisition at the top of the list. Investigators learned that Patterson had been preparing to kidnap Thompson and used the stolen medical equipment to conduct experiments on captive victims as part of his delusional medical operations, which gave the case an even more terrifying edge. Subduing Thompson, seizing his truck and its contents, and moving the driver and the medical equipment to a distant location where Patterson planned to set up a permanent subterranean medical operation, were all part of Patterson's intricate preparations. Marcus Dale Patterson was detained at the rest area on December 23, 2018, and he was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, cargo theft, stalking, and attempted kidnapping. Patterson was discovered to have sedatives, surgical equipment, and comprehensive plans for a temporary medical facility where he intended to house Thompson and other abducted victims when he was taken into custody. He was conclusively connected by DNA evidence to many cargo thefts and the disappearances of 3 people who had been reported missing from northeastern medical facilities. Patterson was found guilty of federal offenses such as operating an unregistered medical institution, stealing medical equipment, and abduction. He's presently receiving psychiatric therapy for his delusional problems in the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina, after being given a life sentence without the possibility of release. Prosecutors disclosed during Patterson's trial that he had been preparing to grow his business to include many mobile medical facilities and a network of accomplices who would assist him in obtaining victims and medical supplies. Comprehensive changes to medical transport security processes and background checks for anyone with access to medical facilities and shipment details were brought about by the Patterson case. In collaboration with producers of medical devices, the FDA developed quick reaction protocols to look into medical cargo thefts and improve tracking systems for expensive equipment. New guidelines were created by the American Organization for Nursing Leadership. Healthcare personnel can report possible risks to medical transport operations and spot suspicious activity around medical facilities with the support of training programs. These initiatives stress the significance of safeguarding private data on the transportation of medical equipment and keeping an eye out for anyone who might be attempting to criminally target healthcare infrastructure. For drivers who transport medical equipment, a specific security program was created that offers improved communication tools, real-time tracking capabilities, and direct collaboration with law enforcement when drivers suspect criminal activity. For drivers who had been traumatized by interactions with hazardous people, who endangered their safety and security. The program also offered psychological help services. On December 25, 2018, William Thompson retired as scheduled after successfully completing his last delivery. However, his understanding of the risks encountered by professional drivers was permanently altered by the encounter with Patterson. The Medical Device Manufacturers Association and the Pennsylvania State Police recognized Thompson for his cooperation with the investigation and his alertness in spotting the threat, which stopped Patterson from executing his planned attacks. In remembrance of those harmed by Patterson's illegal actions, a memorial fund was created to support the families of those impacted and to finance studies into security technology that could help safeguard medical transport activities from comparable dangers. Additionally, the fund sponsors yearly safety conferences aimed at detecting and stopping criminal activity related to healthcare transportation mechanisms for truck drivers who move expensive medical supplies and other transporting delicate goods across the roadway system in America. The case of the medical stalker serves as a sobering reminder that even ordinary deliveries can pose a threat to public safety, and that criminal threats might come from unexpected sources, can be targeted by people who have harmful obsessions. The example illustrated the crucial significance of staying informed about questionable surveillance practices and reporting issues to law authorities right once, if drivers believe they could be the victims of illegal stalking or planned operations. Thompson's farewell speech served as evidence of the bravery and expertise of America's truck drivers, who persisted in moving the supplies and machinery that keep our society running in spite of the severe actual threats they face from individuals looking to take advantage of their vital service for illegal ends. In the vast our country's roadway system, and motorists like Thompson serve as protectors of trade in public safety, making sure that vital commodities arrive their destinations while encountering the most sinister aspects of human nature.